No, you're being dishonest, you're being
I'm not
weaselly,
being
and you're being
dishonest,
incredibly bad faith, and I can easily explain why. It's because you're not taking into account the full context of what I'm saying. You're hearing a word or two, and then you're latching onto it, acting like it proves your point. It
has to
says...
be 2 or more of the following. So, like, let's say you're just like I remember.
No, at least 6 of the following, one of which must be the first criteria.
On the screen, it says marked incongruence, at least 6 months duration, as identified by at least 2.
One's experienced gender, lasting, and then it says defines gender dysphoria in children as marked incongruence between one's experienced gender lasting at least 6 months as manifested by at least 6 of the following, one of the which must be the first criteria, which is a strong desire to be the other gender. It's not just, hey, you like Barbies, so you're a girl. Nobody's doing this. This is the fucking straw man.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are now unmuted.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Well, I gave them a special thanks, so I hope that I know it was muted. But once again, Hunter fans, thank you so much for being here, especially if we disagree, taking the time out of your day, especially because this is the second time we've chatted. So yeah. So I actually, before we got into a debate, I did want to ask you a couple questions just like about you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Just where are you from? Can you tell me a little bit about you? I don't really know anything about who you are as a person.
Well, I mean, what do you mean, like, where am I from? Like, the area? I mean, I'm...
Like, are you, first of all, do you keep that private? Is Hunter your real name? Are you, like, and if you don't keep that private, where did you grow up? And what was your life like growing up?
Well, I mean, I grew up in Arnold, Maryland. Kind of, it's by Annapolis, Maryland. And yeah, Hunter is my real name. And growing up, it was mostly just a Christian conservative household. Politics wasn't really like a huge thing in my upbringing, though. It was much more my grandparents who were the politics people. And my parents, you know, they were the typical, like, vote Republican 'cause Republican sort of thing. They just weren't very politically active. And so it was more so my grandparents that actually really got me into politics to begin with. And so for a good long time, as most people know, I was a pretty big conservative. And then times changed, things changed. I learned new information. And yeah, now I've kind of moved over to being a social democrat who is a huge simp for trans people, as you know.
Obviously. Just out of curiosity, did your parents want you to go to the Naval Academy or any of the service academies or join the service? I mean, living so close to Annapolis, you would have to think.
My grandfather did. He was always telling me that I should join the Air Force because he was in the Air Force. And he was always saying, you should join the Air Force, Hunter. What? Hey, you know, you can get all these benefits from the Air Force. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know if that's for me, but...
Was he enlisted? Was he an officer? What did he do?
I'm pretty sure he was enlisted. It's been a while. He passed away a couple years ago now. So it's been a while since I've actually like talked to him about the details there. But he definitely was a big part of the Air Force. That was something really important to him. And I'm pretty sure that, yeah, he enlisted himself.
Do you know how long he served and what his rank was?
I believe he served over 10 years. I could be incorrect, but I believe he served for a pretty good chunk of time. And unfortunately, I don't know which rank he was. But I do know that once he passed, I mean, he had the whole military funeral thing, which was pretty honoring. So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's great. So what made you transition from conservative to a social democrat that simps for trans people?
Yeah. Mostly just seeing evidence and hearing arguments that I found to be far more convincing than some of the conservative arguments on this thing.
Where were you seeing this evidence, and what made you reach out to these different avenues?
I mean, when it came to the evidence thing, like I was originally confronted in it just like I am confronted with different evidence nowadays. Like it was mostly just debate. And I would be confronted with evidence that kind of contradicted what I thought at the time. And a lot of it was just looking into it in my own private time, where obviously, you know, my ego wouldn't be hurt. So I looked into it, and it was from there that I really started to move in that direction. And
where were you having these debates?
Well, I debated Vosh, the lefty commentator, way back before he was really as popular as he is nowadays. And that was really the first time that I was confronted with like stronger evidence. But then
YouTube, social media, is that where you were seeing these
yeah.
debates?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. YouTube, social media, places like that. And then it was over time, though, that I sort of, from my own research and whatnot, sort of shifted my opinions there. A lot of people frame it as I lost one debate and did a 180 overnight. I can assure you that is not what happened. It was very much a long process of introspection and research myself. But yeah, it was just a long process at the end of the day.
Um, so how many years? Like how many presidents did you vote for that were Republican on the ticket?
Well, I voted for Trump, and I think that was the first time I was able to vote. Because I have not voted before then. So yeah, I voted for Donald Trump uh, during his first run in 2016, and then this time around, I voted for Biden.
Did you ever attend higher education?
Like go to college? No, I didn't. That's something that I definitely regret. The way that my upbringing was, it just I felt like there wasn't really much emphasis on the importance of higher education, and so looking back now, that's definitely something that I regret, and it might even be something that I pursue later on in my life.
Okay, so when you do pursue it, because I think you'd be successful in that, what major do you think you would study?
It would probably be something with politics, business, something along that end of things. I'm. It's funny because I know you're a big math person, but like I am
Mhm.
terrible at math. So one of the biggest things that held me back from pursuing higher education was I knew that I was going to have to do like the mandatory math stuff as well, and
Mhm.
I genuinely don't think I would be able to get through it because I was so dog shit at math. So yeah.
Do you think today you would be able to get through the higher math, like Calc 2? I think Calc 2 is most general education requirement.
Yeah, I would need to go I would literally need to like start back at the basics of like algebra and then work my way back through it because the way that I was taught math growing up, it just did not like the foundational elements of math were not instilled in me in a way to make any of the higher up math make sense. So, I mean,
Mm.
I went through like multiple different tutors and it was just like a nonstop struggle for me to get through of something. I think it was like algebra 1, like very simple stuff compared to the college level
Mhm.
stuff, and it was just something that I really struggled with. Yeah,
Interesting. And I'm sorry that was a struggle in your life. That
it's
when
okay.
math is a struggle, it could be really daunting. And someone asked me, and as a math major, someone asked me to apply like basic trig to your everyday life, and I was struggling to. I mean, I was like, if you're building a house, you need to know right angles, and they're like, how often am I building a house? And it's
Right,
like,
right.
okay, what if you need a tip? And she's like, I got a tip calculator. So I understand why it's a little daunting, and if you're trying to go into something like political science, do you really need, you know,
The math
uh,
stuff.
right? Like I understand that. So I'm sorry that you were dissuaded from pursuing more education simply because of that. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of higher education in the first place. I think it's somewhat of a scam. So I think you kind of dodged a bullet.
Mm,
You're clearly very successful creating your own company, creating your own platforms on YouTube. You were kind of forced to do something without having that degree to fall back on. You had to build your own success
hmm.
um, because you couldn't just be like wave a degree and then apply for these low end jobs because
Right.
that's what it's been watered down to these days. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my opinion on higher education.
Okay.
But speaking of, I did want to get actually back into the math though, like you said, because I was a bit confused. Henry's going to pull up the study that we talked about last time. We were talking about last time, you and I, kids transitioning and whether or not it's healthier for kids to go through the medical process, right?
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
Of transitioning. And so, Henry, if you could pull up the study that was Hunter study,
Which one was
not the
this?
not the Swedish study.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you were talking about the Swedish one or not.
Yeah, so I we will pull up the Swedish one later. But see, my problem with this one, and he has the part highlighted that I have a problem with, because I read it and it said that it was better for, or some kids who transitioned were less suicidal depending on which way they transitioned. However, this study was done over a very short period of time.
Sure. Well, which study is this? Because I had multiple ones.
Could you go to the top just so you could see the title really quick, and then we'll go back down to
Oh, hold on. I
methods.
didn't realize it was on here. Transgender adolescent suicide behavior. Um,
Uh,
that's okay.
a
I actually don't even remember bringing that one up, but I can look it up. Hold on.
So, well, all of the studies. Let's go to the Swedish study.
What
If
was
you
it?
don't mind.
Transgender. Well, hold on. Wait. I want to transgender adolescent. What was it? Suicidality.
Suicide behavior. So the main issue that I just wanted to point out with this one was, and I want to compare and contrast to the Swedish study. So we'll bring this one back up in a second.
But are
Can
we going
we
to have to
bring
go
up?
back into the same thing we did already with the Swedish study? Because last time we started arguing because the author herself said that the study didn't actually prove what you were trying to say it did. All that study found was
What
that
do you mean?
that study found was that trans people on average have a higher suicidality. It didn't mean that going through treatment was causing the higher suicidality. And she's also been involved in other studies which found that treatment did benefit the suicide rate in regards to lowering it.
Well, can you please bring up the other studies that she's in? But also, I would like to bring up her. Okay, I'd like to bring up 2 points. One, the fact that we admit, that you and I admit right now, that people who go through the transgender surgery, according to that study, experience higher suicidality 10 years post op, according to that study.
Yeah, I think that study just said that they had a higher suicide rate compared to the general population, which is to be expected. So there's a high suicide rate. Going through treatment and transition lowers the suicide rate, but the suicide rate's still higher than the general population. And that's why the study concluded with there needs to be better trans healthcare and more outreach to benefit trans people and lower that suicidality.
Well, that's actually not what the study says, because the study has different people who go into the study, some of which, all of them experience gender dysphoria, some of which transition, some of which don't. And it shows that those that transitioned had the highest suicidality rate, and that suicidality rate was at its peak post transition, 10 years post transition.
That's what this study said, because it says persons with transsexualism after sex reassignment had considerably higher risk for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. Our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism and should inspire improved psychiatric and somatic care after sex reassignment for this patient group. So all there's.
Can we pull up that, Henry? If we could pull up the
I'm reading this though, and the study specifically says that it did alleviate gender dysphoria. It just doesn't suffice as a complete, all-encompassing treatment, which is to be expected. We already know, for example, that trans people commit suicide at higher rates, partially because of discrimination and social stigma. So that's always going to be a role there as well.
If that were the case, so first of all, the study, whatever the researchers say the causes are, that's not the math that they calculated. They can come up, the math that they calculated was the suicide rates of transgender people. They did not equate for, they attempted to, but they could not equate for what was causing the suicide, whether that be social pressures or whether that be some of the issues with transitioning.
Sorry to cut you off, but it's my understanding that you can.
Do you not think that it's possible that a lot of these suicides had something to do with becoming a permanent medical patient? So for instance, if you transition from male to female, right? You have a new wound inside of you, and it's supposed to be mimicking a vaginal wall, right? And it's supposed to be mimicking a vagina. You have to use some medical phallic device to keep this wound open for a year. And if you're unsuccessful at every single day penetrating yourself properly medically, then you can create these pockets and these deep wounds inside of you that become infected and could cause serious life-threatening
Yeah, well, of
issues.
course there's possible problems, obviously. Like, I mean, first of all, any surgery carries potential risks, so there is that to take into account. And I mean, it's possible, sure, that some of, like, maybe a couple people committed suicide because they were unhappy with the results or whatnot, but the available data and research that we have heavily suggests that it has far more to do with external factors such as societal discrimination. This is why if you look at children, for example, who are suffering from gender dysphoria, their likelihood of committing suicide significantly decreases if they have support from parents or family or friends surrounding them. So basically, if there's a more accepting environment, their likelihood of committing suicide
Can I
decreases.
see that study?
Sure, yeah, I can pull it up out of from my research thing.
And I am curious as to whether or not, so there's so many different factors that are involved in a study like what you're saying. And also because last time we spoke, when you said a study said this, and then I looked into it, it didn't quite say that.
Which study?
So, for instance, the Swedish study, you said that the author, last time we spoke, you said that the author kind of rebuked the entire study. And then when I read her, her Ask Me Anything on Reddit, that's not what she was saying. She was saying, yes, transgender people do commit suicide at their peak, 7 to 10 years post surgery. That is what my study says. However, I think it's because of people bullying them, or
I'm
because
going
of
to look into that
societal
because I don't
issues,
think
or
that's
because
true.
of
That's not what I was
well,
reading it from either. I wasn't reading it from sorry, I'm trying to find the same thing. I'm trying to find this all at the same thing. I don't believe that's what she was saying.
I mean, Henry, can you please pull up her
I wasn't looking at the
Reddit?
Reddit page either, but I'm trying to find multiple studies for you at the
Can
same
you
time
pull
here.
up
So just give
the
me a second
picture
here.
that I sent you from that Reddit post, Henry? Please, the screenshot.
I'm trying to find the one about support from family.
Yeah, and you could just send that. I don't know if you have Henry. You could send that to me or Henry.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
So let me look up the first thing, which is that I was reading it from the is the Advocate Swedish study gender.
Okay, can you scroll down on that picture, Henry, or did I only send you that?
So I was reading this here from the Trans Advocate, which was just doing an interview with her. Let me see what
Okay,
it says
the outcome
here.
measures of mortality, cause of death, psychiatric, inward care, are diagnosis, psychiatric, inward care for suicide attempts, psychiatric, inward care for drug or alcohol abuse, and crime and violent crime. The outcomes are adjusted for psychiatric morbidity prior to change of legal sex and gender affirming genital operation and immigration status.
So here's what it says right here. The author says, it's frustrating that people misrepresent her work. Of course, trans medical and psychological care is efficacious. A 2010 meta-analysis confirmed by studies thereafter show that medical gender-confirming interventions reduces gender dysphoria. And let me see if she was part of this
if you
study.
look at her Reddit, and if we pull it up, she talks about being a trans advocate. So if you're going to cherry pick a bunch of studies after, let's look at the timeline of events. This lady is a trans activist. She makes a study. The study shows that trans people commit suicide at their peak, not prior to the surgery, right? Because what you're saying is these people are so suicidal they have to get the surgery. Okay?
So but the study specifically omits,
the highest rate of suicidality is 7 to 10 years post surgery for all.
First of all, I have a study that shows there's no increased suicide risk after 20 years. So we can look at that one in a second. But the author of the study says people who misuse the study always omit the fact that the study clearly states that it is not an evaluation of gender dysphoria treatment. If we look at the literature, we find that several recent studies conclude that...
You interrupted me.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to continue with what
I interrupted you to correct what you said because...
you're not correcting me. You're simply interrupting me. So I'm going to continue with what I was saying. So first, she has this study. Study shows definitively that that transgender people are most likely to commit suicide 10 years post-surgery. If it were true that they were suicidal pre-surgery, that would have been found in the data. It was not in the data. Now, she is upset. She clearly states that she is a trans activist. She says this in her Reddit stuff. She says that she is helping the trans community, okay? So she has an agenda. So now, after her study has been used by conservatives to do opposite of what her intended goals was, she cherry picked some studies to try to attempt to prove her
You're
point.
just making a story right now. This is now I need to interrupt you because this is just factually incorrect. First of all, you're trying to do some weird ad hom attack by suggesting that because she's a trans activist, suddenly we can't trust the data she's producing. I don't know what that has to do with anything. I know that you're trying to suggest that she has some kind of a bias or that she is not being accurate when she's reciting her data. But if she was a trans activist, why would she publish a study that shows that it's not beneficial for trans people to transition and then what, just walk back on it? This doesn't make any sense.
Because I don't think she realized before she started her study that it would have the results that it had, right? And she already had the data. What was she going to do? After 10 years of studying this is the longest, most comprehensive study on the trans issue in history. Okay, in recorded history, and you're telling us that she would just scrap that data because it didn't turn out to how she liked. I mean,
I'm not saying she scrapped it. I'm saying you're misinterpreting it because it doesn't evaluate whether or not gender or whether or not treatment benefited gender dysphoria. All it did was look at suicidality.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that based off that study, both you and I agree that transgender people are most suicidal 10 years post-surgery.
No. I don't know if I agreed with that, but I can understand why you would think that if there's certain data points that show that.
I agree with that. That's what the study
This is in the Swedish study. A recent systematic review and meta-analysis concluded that approximately 80% reported subjective improvements in terms of gender dysphoria, quality of life, and psychological symptoms.
Okay, but based off the most comprehensive and largest study and longest study that we have in recorded history that is based off the actual deaths and suicides of the patients, we see a spike 10 years post-surgery.
Why am I looking at this study that says trends in suicide death risk in transgender people results from the Amsterdam cohort of gender dysphoria study 1972 through 2017? And it says, we observed no increase in suicide death risk over time and even a decrease in suicide death risk in trans women. And then it says the suicide risk in transgender people is higher than in the general population. Hold on, please, wait. You got really mad at me when I interrupted you, so now let me finish.
Wait, is this a totally different study that we're talking about now? Because I've never.
You said 10 years there's a spike in suicidality, and I'm giving you a study that shows that in 20 years there's no spike.
Okay, so that's skipping the people who are already suicided at this point.
20 years after. There was no increase after 20 plus years.
So don't you think people who have survived it, who have survived the depression and realization that they have turned their body into something, into something that it is not, don't you think after 20 years they are less likely to succumb to that depression? If you've already survived 10 years under that depression, I highly doubt you're going to succumb on your 20th year. But that, I haven't even seen this study. You're more than welcome to send it to me. We were talking about the Swedish study.
Okay, I went back to the Swedish study then since you wanted to bring that one up again. I have looked through this Swedish study extensively now, and every part of the Swedish study says that treatment and surgery does alleviate gender dysphoria, just that
How long is that study, sir?
Just that it's not enough.
In the last 20 seconds, you read that study extensively in the last 20. That is impressive.
Wait, no, I looked into the study extensively for where it mentions gender dysphoria, and it says, even though surgery and hormonal therapy alleviates gender dysphoria, it is apparently not sufficient to remedy the high rates of morbidity and mortality found among transsexual persons. Improved care for the transsexual group after the sex reassignment should therefore be considered. That's what this study concludes.
That is their opinion. That is their next hypothesis.
This is the conclusion. Wait, no. Stop. This is not their opinion. This is the conclusion. No, shh. This is the
So
fucking conclusion of the Swedish study that you're
right,
obsessing over right here.
in the conclusion, what they're doing is they're setting up their next hypothesis for their following studies.
The
Yes.
conclusion is what they conclude based on the data.
So
How are
based
you
on the
being so
data,
dishonest right now?
we are saying this. We consider extra affirmative care to be the next steps. We need to be in your conclusion. I know you didn't go to school, but I went to school. And when I wrote a study, after the study, in the conclusion, I would put what further studies need to be done,
Okay.
right?
You're
In fact, if you
losing it
didn't
right
put
now.
that
You're
in your
melting down. First of all, it's
study,
adorable that you asked me if I went to school just so you could throw back into my face later on. That's very cute. However, if you aren't complete, well, hold on. If you're not content with the fucking conclusion of the study that you're obsessing over, here's a part in the middle of the study, okay?
then at least if you're not going to
Be
go to school,
quiet.
at least learn how to
Strengths
write
and
a
limitations of the study. Given the nature of sex reassignment, a double-blind randomized control study of the result after sex reassignment is not feasible. We therefore have to rely on other study designs. For the purpose of evaluating whether sex reassignment is an effective treatment for gender dysphoria, it is reasonable to compare reported gender dysphoria pre- and post-treatment. So then it says, such studies have been conducted either prospectively or retrospectively and suggest that sex reassignment of transsexual persons improves quality of life in gender dysphoria.
Okay, so once again, this is the compilation study that you're talking about of the same woman who did the prior Swedish study.
This is the Swedish study, specifically in the Swedish study.
You're saying this is within the Swedish study. The Swedish study that shows that 10 years post-op, people are most likely to commit suicide at that time.
Yes, because what they're showing is that the treatment is effective in alleviating the gender dysphoria.
How are they putting that in the math? Explain to me how they are determining that is the cause as opposed to becoming a permanent. How do they know what is the cause of suicide? Because as a math person, as a data person, I can tick in a box whether or not a person is dead or alive, but I can't read people's mind and know what caused them to do the deed.
I never
right?
said this
And
shows the
so,
cause of why they committed suicide. The study from
you're
Sweden.
saying
Wait,
it's
can I just repeat myself then? The Swedish study specifically looks into quality of life of trans people. That's what it's looking at primarily. It's not evaluating whether or not treatment of gender dysphoria is effective or not. And if it were, then it would be against your point because it says this suggests that even though sex reassignment alleviates gender dysphoria, there is a need to identify and treat co-occurring psychiatric morbidity in transsexual persons. This goes along with. Wait, I need to just finish what I was saying. Please, let me just finish what I was saying. This goes along exactly with what I've said. I've never argued that transgender reassignment surgery is the number one magic band-aid that's going to fix everything. Trans people face discrimination. There's additional barriers that they struggle with. However, the Swedish study that you keep on referencing specifically and explicitly says that the sex reassignment surgery does alleviate gender dysphoria.
How would you measure that?
Measure what? Read the study. You're the expert here, apparently.
Right. That's not a factor that you would be able to. The alleviation of dysphoria is not a mathematical factor that you would be able to calculate in a study. So however, the rate of suicide is a mathematical thing you'd be able to calculate. And further, the people who are doing this study, right? The therapists who are doing this study, they believe that gender affirming care, as they call it, they believe affirming the gender is the correct care. And therefore, they think that dysphoria is thinking, and I believe that dysphoria is thinking that you're in the wrong sex. So therefore, if you go through the process of pretending to be the opposite sex, yes, that would relieve your dysphoria temporarily, but you'd have so many other issues. For instance, here's all of the issues that transgender
Can I just, before people, I want to hear this, but it's just, I'm like mind blown right now. Why are you bringing up the Swedish study? I want to explain this. Why are you invoking the Swedish study to say that, look, this Swedish study shows that trans people have a higher suicide rate, but now you're trying to simultaneously discredit the Swedish study by saying they're all biased in favor of trans people because the Swedish study shows that this treatment does benefit gender dysphoria?
you're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying in that sentence you just read, and I understand that it comes from that study, but you're saying gender affirming care relieves gender dysphoria. So you have to first of all believe that the care is gender affirming care. Second of all, you would
It's
have
sex
to
reassignment,
then
but yeah.
okay, then you would have to understand, of course, pretending to be the opposite sex would relieve the dysphoria when you think that you're the opposite like obviously that doesn't change the fact that there's still like
You're telling
value
me to give you
at the
numbers, and now you're
highest
just making
rate.
up a story to try and justify the fact that the data you're obsessed with contradicts your
What?
feelings.
No, think about it logically, right? If you think, okay, if you thought you were a girl and you have this actual dysphoria, the uncomfortable feeling of feeling like you're a woman, right?
Hmm.
And then you put on a wig, you put on makeup, and people start believing you're a woman, wouldn't that alleviate the feeling of being a woman and having that not match? If it matches, wouldn't that alleviate that feeling? So yes, it relieves it temporarily relieves the dysphoria, but it gives you so many other issues. It gives you issues of not knowing. First of all, there's societal issues, and there's going to be societal issues because we have an issue as to whether or not where people go in sports issues, bathrooms, schools, prisons. There's so many issues involving sex that you're going to run into societal issues if you just decide to change sex and then involve yourself in sports or end up going to prison. There's going to be an issue there. So, and then also you're going to experience societal issues if unfortunately you're not Blair White and you don't end up looking like a hot chick and you end up looking like a dude in a wig. Like, I'm sorry, it's unfortunate, but some people do not.
Yeah, usually it's transphobia that heavily contributes to the suicidality. So this is the thing, is like, you bring up the you look like a man in a wig, or you're just pretending to be a woman thing, but it's that kind of rhetoric that largely contributes to a higher suicide rate in this group. The study
So
you
you,
gave me shows that the medical intervention as far as sex reassignment benefits trans people. That's the study you sent me. That's what it says. So yes, of
okay,
course there are going to be additional complications, and I looked up the complications in this study, and it says, with respect to suicide and deaths from other causes after sex reassignment, an early Swedish study followed 24 transsexual persons for an average of 6 years and reported 1 suicide. A subsequent Swedish study
24.
recorded 3 suicides after sex reassignment surgery. A recent Swedish follow-up study reported no suicides in 60 transsexual patients, but 1 death due to complications after the sex reassignment surgery.
Okay, so you have to send me your studies beforehand, but also 1 out of 24 and 3 out of 24 are very high numbers, and not good for you.
Yeah,
Anyway,
well, no, it's not
hold on.
good
I
because of
just
the
want to say,
social stigma. The study says that the treatment benefited or
how are
alleviated the
you?
gender dysphoria.
You can't calculate what it like. That's not a mathematical figure that you could calculate. As for another thing, you said last time we spoke that transgender people have a brainwave, right? Like their brainwaves are different, like they match to the opposite gender.
Some of them, yes, not all of them, but some, yes.
Why not all?
Because what it means to be transgender is simply that your identity differs from your biology. That's really all it
So
means to
then
be
wouldn't
trans.
that mean that your brain, like your identity would be like the way that you think you're, so wouldn't they
Yes, but
all
it's not. Some of it could be conscious. It's not purely because of difference in estrogen receptors in the brain. That would be more, I would say, transsexualism when it's a
so then
very biological thing.
what percentage of um of transgender people have the brain waves opposite to their biological gender?
I don't understand the question.
You said, right, that if you, Hunter,
Hmm.
were trans and thought you were a woman, right, you would have brain waves, or at least some of you would have brain waves that's similar to a woman. What percentage?
I don't know. I would have to look into the study again. But all I know is they did a study in a university here, I think it was a year or two ago, where they looked at, I think it was 10 to 20 different trans people, and they all had differences in estrogen receptors in their brain, meaning that there was a biological basis for some of the reason that they identified differently. All I'm
Wait, they
saying is that that
all
doesn't
have
apply to every
differences?
single trans person.
If they all have differences, I bet if we got 10 straight men, if I bet everybody simply has differences in estrogen receptors then. Isn't that possible? And then if it were true that the vast majority of trans people actually had brain waves that differed from their biological sex, why wouldn't we only transition the people whose brain waves?
Because it's not always a biological thing, just like you can be trans without gender dysphoria. You don't need to have gender dysphoria necessarily.
Okay.
But I'm reading through this too, and it does say that data is inconsistent with respect to psychiatric morbidity post-sex reassignment. Let's see. Others have reported on regrets, psychiatric morbidity, and suicide attempts after sex reassignment. A recent system, yes, a regret.
What percentage of people? So, like, what 80%? About that?
Wait, hold on.
Do you think that's a problem that people regret?
You hear one word that like you think proves your point, and then you just run off with it. First of all, no, we can't.
Can we talk about?
No, we cannot talk about this because you have not let me finish reading what I was reading from your study that you keep bringing up. A recent systematic review and meta-analysis concluded that approximately 80% reported subjective improvement in terms of gender dysphoria, quality of life, and psychological symptoms. But there are also some studies reporting high psychiatric morbidity and suicide rates. This goes along exactly with what I've already been saying, is that there's no way this is going to just magically fix everything. There are other issues as well. Therapy might be necessary as well. A good support system might be necessary as well. No surgery is going to be 100% fix all, but 80% reported an improvement after sex reassignment. From the study done in the 1970s? This is not actually this is actually incredibly significant.
Improvement of gender dysphoria. Correct.
An alleviation of gender dysphoria and an improvement of quality of life and psychological symptoms.
So we discussed that. So like if the therapist, right, is measuring your improvement based off how gender dysphoric you feel, and you feel like a woman, and then all of a sudden you pretend to be a woman, and then a bunch of people start treating you like a woman, don't you think that would alleviate your feelings of feeling like a woman and having that not match with being a biological male?
Maybe if you have your body if you have your body aligning with what the brain yes, that's usually how you do it.
Okay, so but if your brain doesn't match, then we shouldn't. So if their brain doesn't match, then we shouldn't trans.
Well, if we're talking about gender dysphoria here, so yeah, obviously there's something deeper than just like a difference of identity. They obviously have something else going on, something psychological or something biological at play here. That's why they would have gender dysphoria in the first place. So yes, them changing would absolutely better their mental well-being. I don't know why how this contradicts anything.
How many people regret getting the surgery? Like
there's very low regret rates.
A large population regret getting the surgery.
What about the larger population that is happy they got the surgery?
Okay, except for the fact that a lot of that study, right, takes into account like very close pre-op, and then the suicide rate peaks at 10 years post.
Is the 10 years thing in this is the Swedish study the one that brings up the 10 years thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also the most comprehensive study in history. So as soon as we do a study with more than 24 people, and the fact that 1 out of 24 people died and then 3 out of 24 people died is not helping your figures. Like we need to be doing a very comprehensive study, but nobody's willing to do it. And then also another thing
there's a chart here that I think shows why they were committing suicide. Gender separated analysis were performed. Survival plot graphically illustrates the survival of the sex reassigned cohort and matched controls.
You're more than welcome to send anything to me or Henry, and we will put it on the screen for all of us to see. It's not fair for one person to see it.
Well, yeah, it's the Swedish study. You already have it.
Oh, okay. Then Henry, please pull up the Swedish study.
Baseline characteristics among sex reassignment subjects in Sweden and population controls matched for birth, year, and sex. So female at birth, male after sex change was 41%. Okay. Now, where do they talk about the suicide? Let's see.
Page 9.
Which table is this? Table 1. Okay. There are no substantial differences between Table 2 describes the risk for selected outcomes. Sex reassignment transsexual persons of both genders had approximately a 3 times higher risk of all-cause mortality than controls. Also, after adjustment for covariables. Okay. Hold on. Suggests that the survival of transsexual persons started to diverge from that of matched controls after about 10 years of follow-up. So that's what you're referring to, I'm guessing. The cause-specific mortality
Mm.
from suicide was much higher in sex reassigned persons. Mortality due to cardiovascular disease was moderately increased, whereas the numerically increased risk.
So yeah, that's another thing. So not only did they die of suicide, but they also had increased rates of death due to other medical issues, such as cardiovascular issues. So I mean, there's a number of reasons why these medical treatments are so negative. For instance, how do you explain all of the people who have gone through the vaginoplasty and then experienced the severe
Yeah,
scarring,
there can
the
absolutely be
inability
complications when it actually comes to the treatment, and that's something that would need to be addressed within the medical field. But I'm reading right here, and it seems as though it's I'm trying to make sure I understand this properly. Risk of various outcomes among sex reassignment subjects in Sweden. Because the suicidality doesn't seem to be a very large cause.
it
Um,
is. Yeah.
okay, so there
Yeah.
is a high suicide attempt, sure. Um, let's see. Um, suicide, sex reassignment injuries, so high risk for suicide attempts. This was not statistically significant. The risks of being hospitalized for substance misuse or accidents were not significantly increased. Okay. Um, yeah, it sounds like now you're saying like there are complications in surgery, which is to be expected. And then when you talk about things like the regret rate, I mean, do you want to look at the regret rate of people who say regret having
No, I don't. I wanna talk
like knee
about
surgery?
I
Because there's
wanna
a high
talk
regret
about
rate
the
of those people
no,
too.
I wanna talk about actually middle school aged kids, especially children, females that have a social influence
Well, before we get
transition.
into that, I would like to just wrap this
No,
one.
I
Well,
would
hold
like
on.
to
I would
get
like to just wrap this one up because I did want to look into the discrimination element, and you talk about how there could be complications with surgery. Part of the reason with that could even be attributable to the fact that if they need additional help, that they might be less likely to seek out help because according to your study, it says there might be other explanations to increased cardiovascular death, like what you talked about the complications. So smoking was in one, which is a problem. And it's also possible that transsexual persons avoid the healthcare system due to a presumed risk of being discriminated. So
so you
again,
think trans people smoke at a higher rate than the average population?
they might, yeah. There are a lot of downstream negative effects from a marginalized group in society. I mean, we see this with gay people as well, that they have higher rates of discrimination, they have higher rates of depression, higher rates of homelessness. This is
Do
all
they smoke
downstream.
at higher rates than the
I
average
think so,
population?
actually. Yeah, they definitely do drugs at higher rates
Do
because of the
Jews do
yes.
Jews smoke at higher rates?
Do Jews smoke at high rates? I don't know.
They don't.
Okay.
They don't.
Well, I don't know, but all I do know is that based on what the study says that you sent me, at least some of the reasons for the cardiovascular deaths could literally be because they weren't getting treatment when they needed it due to the perception of discrimination, which again supports my claim that the best we can do here is try and reduce societal discrimination and be more accepting of an already marginalized group. And this
Well, there's
will,
gender clinics in all 50 states.
yeah, and
So,
this will absolutely contribute to a decrease in suicidality over time. So that's just
uh,
what your study said, though.
we're
But if you
not
want to move on to
seeing
the next
that.
thing.
Yeah, I want to talk about the fact that that kids, specifically kids in middle school, feel socially pressured to transition, and this has been seen. You see this especially among Hollywood. I mean, that's you can look at all of the celebrities, kids who have transitioned and then detransitioned, and then some of them have transitioned and then detransitioned again. So I just wanted you um, to put together how you could be okay with children deciding to go under these permanent medical decisions, which will cause them to require, which will have, as you admitted, sometimes horrific complications that could lead to death or serious injury, when a lot of them are just socially influenced to do this.
Yeah, so
For
you're talking. It sounds like you're talking about like the social contagion, which I mean,
yeah,
I think we had this conversation last time, but like, so I don't know how many young middle schoolers are going and getting like puberty blockers. Regardless, if they are falling victim to a social contagion, then this is absolutely something that needs to be talked about and needs to be addressed within again the medical field. A lot of the times, these arguments remind me of saying something like there's a problem with certain people being put on antidepressants too quickly. that could be a legitimate problem, but it doesn't mean that depression is pretend. It doesn't mean that people with depression are not real or pretending or have something else wrong with them that's not really depression. A lot of the times it's a flaw within the medical institution. So ideally, these gender clinics would be searching and snuffing out people who do not legitimately have gender dysphoria, which is why the guidelines did say that they need to be at having consistent, persistent gender dysphoria for a minimum of 6 months. Now, even so, they should be going through proper evaluations to determine whether or not they're really gender dysphoric. I
Do you
don't
think
even
6 months is long enough for
um
these permanent
I don't know if it's
conditions?
long enough. I definitely wouldn't have a problem with it being longer, that's for sure. I just think that it's important to remember that like uh social contagion is a real thing. I mean
Right.
it's been demonstrated to happen with depression even, that if you hang out in a
Like,
group of friends
what
with
were you into as a kid?
what
Like
was I into?
Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Barbie, what were
I
you
wasn't allowed
into?
I wasn't allowed to play with a lot of that stuff since I was Christian homeschooled stuff. But I was like
Jesus dolls.
Jesus dolls, yeah. No, I would do like computer stuff a lot. I was kind of nerdy growing up.
Okay, what was there a specific computer game that you were into?
Um I mean I played some games. I guess I was into like Mario for a little while.
Okay. Um, how long?
I don't know, a couple months, couple year or two.
Okay, I was into Mario too. What was your game? Do you remember what game?
Yeah, Super Mario Galaxy. I still love that game.
Okay, you still love that game. So I was thinking about buying myself a Switch. Where I'm like, you're a grown ass adult and you have no money. You're no way buying that. But anyway, so I understand being obsessed with something, and I can get really obsessive over something, especially as a kid. And especially as a kid, I think I might be autistic. So especially as a kid who might be on the spectrum, um, yeah, I get really obsessive about certain things. So don't, and also, have you noticed that the social contagion, this has been reported, has been especially seen among the autistic and Down syndrome community that so are the
Sure, no,
a
I
large portion of the kids transitioning are autistic or Down syndrome.
so
And
I
so,
would like you to be specific. Kids transitioning or kids reporting that they are LGBT? Because
so
there's a
there's a large
difference.
portion of them that are actually going through like puberty blockers, who are going through the actual process of transitioning. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Large
it would
portion
kind
of
of go
them.
back to what I've said already. Like, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I
Mhm.
already acknowledge that there's such a thing as social contagion. It's already been demonstrated to exist with depression. Again, I'll go back to the same thing I already said. If you have a friend who's been hanging out in a circle of peers and they all have depression, and then you start to feel like you have depression, and then you go to the doctor and you say, I think I have depression, and then they put you on antidepressants, that would be a problem because the medical institution fucked up by not properly evaluating whether or not you are legit in having depression. It doesn't mean
Okay.
that depression as a condition or people with depression are fake, bad, or should somehow be criticized. So it's
First of all,
this.
no one's saying that
I know, but
people with
I'm
depression.
giving you a very cut and dry
But
example.
even your analogy, right? You would still, even if people are becoming too quick to go on depressants, we, and then we should then stop putting people on antidepressants so quickly. Even the people who are actually depressed,
Well,
because the people who are actually depressed, if they're actually depressed, you know, they'll
it
get
if
their antidepressants,
yeah, I
but
think that
it's
the better
better
thing
than
would need to be
having
is
the vast majority of the population be put on
well,
antidepressants.
okay, it's not if there were more people that didn't have depression than people who did have depression being put on antidepressants, then that might be cause for literally pausing giving antidepressants to anybody.
We can
I
look at
think
the opiate
I think
crisis
that
as an example. Don't we wish that we gave
opioids are not
people?
the same as antidepressants. I think some of them could probably be used as an antidepressant, but opioids are highly addictive, controlled substances. These are not the same as like Zoloft or Lexapro, things
Do
like
you
this.
not think Zoloft and Lexapro are addictive? Like if you just like took yourself off Zoloft and Lexapro, you'd feel fine.
No, you would probably feel really bad because your
Yeah,
body is relying on that, but that's not the same as being
those
addicted or
are.
having or having a controlled substance that you're relying on. These are different things.
How is that not? It's
Because you can
your
have
body
if your body
whining
is
and saying
reliant on an
you're
uptick of serotonin or dopamine, usually that's
sick.
because of a prior deficiency. So yes, just cutting out the medication is going to screw up how your brain is operating
So
temporarily.
you're saying if you're priorly deficient chemically, that makes the difference of whether or not it's an addiction?
Wait, no, I'm saying that going cold turkey on virtually any medication is not a good idea because your brain does get used to it and you're dependent on it. Yes,
Yeah, so
that's
yes,
how, so you should
when you
wean off
become
of it, but
dependent on something, that's when you become that's an addiction, just so you know.
wait,
When you
it's
become
a
chemically
reliance. No, it's not. It's a reliance on it, and it's okay to be reliant on it because it's leading to long-term benefits for your overall health. This is
so
not an
whether or not it's
addiction.
okay
Wait,
or
stop.
beneficial
No, you're
makes
not
it an
building up a
addiction?
tolerance and needing to take more and more and more and more like you would with an addiction. This is why people get addicted to Adderall because you build a tolerance and then they take more and more and more. That's not how this works with antidepressants. But regardless, this is like aside the point. All I'm saying is that if this were happening to a large extent with antidepressants, then sure, maybe pause giving medication to anybody. I think the better option would be improve the way in which you vet people. Make sure that there is extensive questioning and a therapist weighing in and you are evaluated by multiple people to determine whether or not you are legitimately depressed. The same thing should be done for gender dysphoria. I don't want people who aren't really gender dysphoria or gender dysphoric to go on any kind of treatment. That would be a bad thing. They don't need that treatment and it would be harmful to them. So yeah, I think that improving the vetting process would probably be the best case scenario there.
Okay. So wouldn't that be, and as you kind of already admitted, increasing 6 months to
I mean, I think
at
from a
minimum of
medical
18
perspective, I
years
think
old?
6 months is pretty significant. Since I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to give my opinion on that. But if
So
somebody
you
said that
think,
they're going to increase it to a year or something, I wouldn't be like up in arms about it.
but I mean, you as a kid, and I don't know if you're on the spectrum or not, but like someone who probably gets like really into whatever you're into and gets um, obsessed with something could,
Hmm.
and then I'm sure you remember being a kid and would get obsessed with video games. If somebody got obsessed with the whole gender social contagion, isn't that like a really easy thing for kids to fall into?
Um, I mean, possibly, but it's a lot deeper than that. This isn't just like
Isn't
I
six
have yeah,
months a
because it's
very
not
short amount of time?
it's not well
Six
no
months is
because
a
it's
very
not
short
no
amount of
because
time.
it's not like I have a hobby that I'm really into transitioning. Like there's a difference between being really into something like a video game and then being or desiring to be the different gender or having an incongruence with the way you feel mentally compared to your biology. There is definitely a big
Mm.
difference there from just like I have a hobby and I'm into these things or something.
There's conventions, right? People get into, there's LGBTQ conventions, there's LGBTQ parades, there's LGBT, like there's people who
Yeah,
wrap their entire identity into the whole
some
LGBTQ thing.
people
Just
do.
just like some people wrap their entire identity into video games, just like some people wrap their entire identity into whatever it may be, their
Yeah, but
job,
this
YouTube.
no, because
So some
it's
kids get wrapped up into this, and kids especially get wrapped up into whatever they're into. This is a big thing that's being pushed by all celebrities. You're pushing like the LGBTQ
so then why
pronouns
wouldn't you
and
just be agreeing
all.
with me? That yeah, like if there is a potential, so if there's a large movement to be more accepting of LGBT individuals, and in that movement, some people are swept up because they're impressionable and think maybe they're trans because they see it on TV or something. Why wouldn't you then agree with me? Which is
Okay, so
okay
then
if
if they
they
think
don't actually if
they're
they're not
trans,
well
then they
hold on
get
wait if
the
they're hold on wait
surgery.
if they're no if they're not actually trans then they should be thoroughly vetted to make
Yes,
sure they
I
shouldn't be given any
agree.
treatment or any medical intervention whatsoever, except for sitting down with a fucking
Yes,
therapist to make sure that they're being evaluated and properly diagnosed. They should be
I
diagnosed with
agree.
gender
My
dysphoria
issue,
before
my
searching out any kind of treatment.
my issue is currently the length of time, 6 months, I don't think is long enough. First of all, I don't think any kids are really mature enough to make these decisions. If you're not even mature enough to decide whether or not you could smoke or get a tattoo or go to war,
You
then you
must
really
notice
are.
there's a difference there, though, because for the, like, yes, for all the talk we do about social contagion, there are also still kids who are legitimately diagnosed with gender dysphoria and are having severe issues because of it. They're suffering because of it. So the difference being, you are not in a life and death situation as to whether or not you get a tattoo or go to war. For some kids,
What's
if
the
they are
suffering?
hold on. For some kids,
The
if they
su-
are hold on. For some kids, if they are diagnosed with gender dysphoria and they are struggling with severe feelings of suicidality or depression because of the incongruence, then that demands treatment. You have to do something.
So wouldn't the severe gender dysphoria, right? Couldn't that also be alleviated to, like, let's say you're a boy and you feel and you grew up in a very Christian household, so you might understand this, and you feel required to do all of these really stereotypical masculine roles. Why can't we have a society more understanding and accepting of feminine boys, as opposed to taking feminine boys and saying, oh, you're probably just a girl?
Well, first of all, I
Like,
don't know
what
who's
if
doing that. If
society,
anybody's looking at a feminine boy saying you're probably a girl, then they're wrong. I'm totally all in
well,
favor of. Hold on, you asked me a question. I'm totally in favor with breaking down these rigid gendered expectations. Of course, I argue for this all the time. But again, there's a difference between, hey, I'm a tomboy, or hey, I'm a guy, but I kind of like wearing my hair long, and then having gender dysphoria and having a discomfort and an incongruence there. Those are different
okay,
things.
let's have Henry, the producer, and we're doing this on the fly. So Henry, this is on you. Big task here. Let's have him look up, like Google search, am I actually a transgender woman? Let's see. And let's see what Google says are, hey, if you like
Look at the
Netflix,
diagnostics,
you
the
might be a woman.
DSM-5.
If you, okay,
Read
the
the
problem is,
DSM-5. They say it's you have to have strong distress, a strong desire to be that of the opposite sex or treated like an opposite gender. This needs to be going on and on. And also, this is
okay.
kind of inconsistent of you because last time you told me that
So,
Google
right.
was.
Oh,
Hold on,
so
wait, wait,
like you
wait,
said,
wait,
severe distress,
Lauren,
severe
Lauren,
desire. Okay.
Lauren. Last time you
Mhm.
told me that you don't trust Google and that they're biased. So why are we now turning to Google to prove your point? You said that Google can't be
They
trusted.
are they are biased because last time when I tried to do a lot of the research that I was trying to do, a lot of the links that I actually, after we last chat, a lot of the links that I were looking for ended up just being broken links of studies that I had previously read. But what I'm trying to point out here is not that Google's truth. I'm not trying to look at Google for the veracity of the matter at hand. I'm trying to look at Google to determine what other people do, because the average person might search this into Google and let's see what it has to say. I want to know what is in the average person's head when they're thinking, I'm an effeminate boy. Um, what am I, maybe a girl? If you're seeing all of this stuff in the news and in media and from all of these celebrities and stuff, what if you Google search this? What would Google tell you?
I'm reading right now what Google told me, the top result being from Planned Parenthood. And it says you're transgender if your gender identity is different from the sex the doctor assigned you at birth. For example, you may be transgender if you were assigned male at birth and know you're a woman. And then it gives a list of things to do. And the one of them
That's
right hold on, wait, wait, wait. One of them right in the middle is talk with a counselor or therapist.
okay, sure. Now I'm looking for a list of, is there like a list where it says if you experience X symptoms, then you might be a woman trapped in a male's body? That's what I'm
No, it
looking
says how
for.
can I figure out my gender identity? Write or
So
draw
you're
about how
looking
you
at the
feel.
things,
Notice
you're
if
not
you
looking at what I'm looking for. So you haven't, but
I typed
also
in
getting
wait,
back
hold on.
to the
Lauren,
DSM,
stop. You're being so incredibly dishonest and weaselly right now.
what
I
the
typed
hell?
in am I transgender into
Don't call me
Google.
names.
The top result is from Planned Parenthood. So if some kid who's all impressionable types this in, this is going to be the top thing that comes up.
I'm
Upon
not
clicking
looking for
it,
the top result. I'm looking for a result that lists a list of symptoms. Okay.
so then you're looking for the
If I,
DSM-5 diagnostics.
okay, okay, let's go to that. That's not what I'm looking for, but let's go to that. I'm looking for just like a page that says if you X feminine trait, X feminine trait,
You're
X
looking for a
feminine
page
trait.
that proves your point.
The point is, I have seen very many pages on like Instagram and such like that that says, oh, uh, if you get your nails done or if you like to do makeup, you might actually be a woman. Can you please pull up the DSM-5, Henry?
Yeah, if
Uh,
by the way, if you saw that on Instagram,
can
like
you
yeah, I'm
list?
not
Can
surprised at
you
all.
list?
People are usually very stupid on Twitter and Instagram, but
Okay, so if you're an impressionable kid and you see a list of symptoms like that, and the gender dysphoria says like, well, if you want to have like a womanhood experience, well, there's nothing wrong with an effeminate boy. And that, I think the problem with society is, especially now, it's so funny. We used to say effeminate boys weren't allowed. Like, oh, you can't be too much of a
Yeah,
wussy
like
or
man
pussy
up.
or
You hear that all the time still.
man up. But now, and it used to be what the conservatives that would say that, but now the liberals are saying, well, if you act, it seems as though, especially with a lot of these documentaries where you see these parents who, like, oh, I knew my child, oh, I'm hitting my mic. I knew my child was actually a girl at the age of 2 because she really liked sparkly shoes. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, what if that was an effeminate boy who liked sparkly shoes?
Yeah, but that's why the parents are not diagnosing the children, and the children are certainly not diagnosing themselves after looking at a fucking Instagram post.
But
Anybody doing
but
that
the
is an
children are
idiot.
still being raised with, and like a lot of these ideologies have. Do you know who Kinzing is?
Well, hold on. Before we get into that, I want to read you the diagnosis here. So, a marked incongruence between one's experience / expressed gender and primary and or secondary sex characteristics. A strong desire to be rid of one's primary and or secondary sex characteristics. A strong desire for the primary and or secondary sex characteristics. A strong desire to be of the other gender. A strong desire to be treated as the other gender. In order to meet criteria for the diagnosis, the condition must be associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. The DSM-5 defines gender dysphoria in children as a marked incongruence between one's experienced expressed gender and assigned gender lasting at least 6 months, as manifested by at least 6 of the following: a strong desire to be the other gender, a strong preference for cross-gender roles, a strong preference for the toys, games, or activities stereotypically used to engage in by the other gender, a strong preference for playmates of the other gender, a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. Like, this isn't
Okay,
just like
actually,
you
this
like
proves
playing
my
with the color
point.
pink, so you're a girl.
No, no, no. You're saying playing with toys is a symptom.
You're
Hold
actually
on.
like
Where?
incredibly dishonest. I don't do
No,
you
let's
know,
go down to that. Let's
Lauren,
go
do you
down
know
to
that you're
where
like
it
do
says,
you know that you're really dishonest when you're having these conversations?
I'm literally trying to read the exact same thing
No,
that
you're
you're
being
reading.
dishonest, you're being
I'm not
weaselly, and
being
you're being
dishonest. I
incredibly
don't.
bad faith, and I can easily explain why. It's because you're not taking into account the full context of what I'm saying. You're hearing a word or two, and then you're latching onto it, acting like it
It has
proves your
to
point.
be.
It
It has to
says,
be 2 or more of the following. So, like, let's say you're just like a. I
no, at
remember
least
being.
6 of the following, one of which
At least
must be the
2 or
first
more of the
criteria.
following. I'm
Holy shit,
saying
this is why you're being
I'm
so
saying
dishonest.
on the screen it says marked incongruence between one's expressed experience gender and assigned gender of at least 6 months duration as identified by at least two, not
One's experienced
dishonest.
gender
More of
lasting
the
and then
following.
it says defines gender dysphoria in children as marked incongruence between one's experienced gender lasting at least 6 months as manifested by at least 6 of the following, one of the
Okay,
which must be
can
the
you
first
scroll down to
criteria,
where
which
he
is a
says
strong desire to be the other gender. It's not
that?
just,
So
hey, you like Barbies, so you're a girl. Nobody's
can we,
doing this. This is the fucking straw
Henry,
man.
can we scroll down to where it says the 6 things and let's see if we could find. First of all, I'm not even seeing.
Are you looking at
Where does it?
psychiatry.org? American
You're more okay. So we have had this scheduled for months, right? Right? Have we not, Hunter? So you have
Yeah.
been more than welcome to send us stuff. We have read every single article you told us to read from the last
What?
debate.
What am I supposed to send you a bunch of sources? This was never agreed on. You said you wanted to talk in January, and I said okay.
I said you're more than welcome to send anything to Henry, the producer. Anything that you
Okay.
want to bring
Well, I'm
up.
sorry that I didn't do that, but
So
this website makes it quite obvious that you have to have at least 6 of the following in children. This isn't even adolescents here. This is children specifically, who would arguably be
can
the
you please
most.
send that to Henry, the producer, so we could put it on
Where do I
screen
send
so
it?
that I don't get called a liar repeatedly?
I'm not calling you a
The link is
liar. I'm
in.
just calling you
I
dishonest.
got called a weasel, and you know what? I'm not a weasel. I'm a ferret in this community. Okay.
Okay. I'll put this in chat because I don't know where else to send it.
Okay. It's a link in private chat. Yeah, you could put it in private chat. Henry has access to that.
Okay.
Anyway.
And it says 6 months
So
manifested by at least 6 of the following. So just all I'm getting at is that the reason I think you're being weaselly and or dishonest or bad faith is because you heard me read off this entire list and you latched onto, oh, a strong preference for the toys. So that
there
must
were
mean that if
several.
somebody likes to play with the color pink, they must be trans.
Okay. So let's look at a couple of these. So a strong dislikes of one's sexual anatomy. Well, that's every female I've literally ever met, especially middle school females. A strong desire for the physical sex characteristics that mask. I'd love to have a wang, but whatever. Okay, strong desire. Okay, a strong preference for the toys, games, or activities. So based off this, I'm a trans dude. Did you know that? So
Have you
as a
had, wait,
trans
do you have,
dude, no,
do you
hold
have
on. As a
clinically, hold on,
trans
wait, do you have
person,
clinically significant distress or impairment in
no,
social,
but I have
occupational, or
a
other important
strong
areas of
preference
functioning?
for toys, games, and activities stereotypically engaged by the other gender. That's one thing that I have. I have a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. There are times when I'm like really disliking my body trust. Strong dislike for, or strong desire for the physical sex characteristics. Yeah, I'd love to have a wang. Like, let's be real.
Why?
Okay. Are you serious? Are you serious
Is this
that
like
these would
Freudian?
be?
Is this like Freudian penis envy all of a sudden here?
Wait,
So you realize there's a couple things here. Is that
first of all, my
this is the
parents would like me so much more if I were a boy. You don't even understand how much my parents
okay? Well,
still
this is
wanted
the
me.
diagnosis for gender dysphoria. So this would be what you would need to meet in
A
order
strong
to.
preference for cross-gender roles in make-believe play or fantasy play.
This is a
Are you
for
kidding me? I know so many effeminate boys who are just gay, who would meet so like 6 of these characteristics at a minimum, and we're saying that this is enough to
You're
tell
trying so hard for
children.
Agachi right now, and you're just suffering badly. I
I'm
don't know what you're
suffering.
talking about right now. This isn't if you are trans. This is if you have gender dysphoria. This is if you are to get treatment. This is what you're concerned about. And it's not just, hey, he likes to play with the color pink and sometimes doesn't like having a penis. It's clinically significant distress and impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, which you do not have, by the way. And it would need to last at least 6 months. A constant desire for, hey, I don't want to associate with anything that usually is associated with my gender identity. I want to be associating with different gender roles, with different gender expressions. Some of that could include toys. Some of that could include the way you dress or the way you want to be treated or pronouns. There's a
I'm
slew
very
of different
excited
things.
to after interviewing you, I have an interview. I haven't even told Henry, the producer, about this, with somebody who is gay, but likes to fits all of that criteria that you just said, and he is vehemently against transing young children, and he feels as though if he were
You're not
to
transing
be
young kids. That
born,
would be giving them treatment. They would already be trans if their identity differs from their biological makeup.
then how come it's so apparent in certain geographical regions of the United States and not in others? So, like for instance, if a if it were truly the gender dysphoria spurred on by just gender dysphoria and not social contagion, why is it so much like the percentage of LGBTQ, specifically trans kids, in Los Angeles and New York, so much higher than like rural areas, and also in Africa, for instance, there's no transgender people, or
I don't
in
know. There's differences in different areas of region, I think, for a lot of different reasons. So like if you're in a poorer region in general, like Africa, for example, and you're more focused on just general survival, odds are you're not going to have much time to focus on your gender identity or how you're treated for that. Just like you could look and say, how come there's not as much depression over in these areas? Because when you're focused on survival, you don't usually start to worry about other conscious conditions because you're focused on more of a primal desire, in this case, to survive, to get by each day, to eat, things like this. If we're talking about different regions, I'm not entirely sure. It could be because some areas are more accepting than others. It could be a degree of social contagion. I don't know. But again, the social contagion thing doesn't disprove my argument at all. It's quite possible, again, that there's a social contagion. The answer to that is simply make sure that the diagnosis for gender dysphoria, which is what demands treatment, not just being trans, the gender dysphoria, is done properly. Make sure that these people are vetted correctly. This would go for any medical condition. Like literally any medical condition. I don't want people going in getting Zoloft if they think they have anxiety. You should be properly vetted for anxiety. You should have to meet certain diagnosis in order to get medication before anything is done that could actually change your body. This is just basic common sense. I hate to use the C word, but this is basically common sense when we're talking about any medical condition. So yeah, I mean, also I think that some of the reasons you're probably seeing an uptick is also that LGBT what it means, that umbrella is also expanding. It's more encompassing. So now people who are maybe non-binary can fit under that label. That doesn't mean they're
Specifically
trans.
trans
That
kids
doesn't mean that they
though,
need to
but
go and get surgery.
there are specifically more kids that are transgender in like Los Angeles, New York, as opposed to Michigan or Montana or other places in the country. And then also, like, if you look at Africa, if what you were saying is true, right, about the gender dysphoria really being the root cause, then you would at least be experiencing kids who are vocalizing that like at a young age because they don't understand like the need to go out and hunt. Like if you're 2 years old, according to the DSM-5 and the DSM-4, it was a lot of the times young boys who were vocalizing it as soon as they could speak. So they're not experiencing any of that in Africa. Any
Yeah,
kids
because just
vocalizing
if no, there could still absolutely be something in relation to their desire to survive. But I don't know. I'm okay saying that I don't know the answer to all of these questions because I don't think I need to know the answer to all of these questions. My argument is not
speaking.
anytime somebody says they're trans, they are 100% trans, believe them or you are a bigot who should burn in hell. This is not my argument. My argument is simply that trans people exist and are real, and whether or not there is a social contagion, whether or not there's inconsistencies in where some people are identifying as opposed to others, doesn't speak to anything as to whether or not trans people are valid and legitimate and deserve acceptance and, if they have gender dysphoria, treatment. That's it.
All right, so I am going to allow my chat to ask questions. So chat, if you have any questions,
Is this like
now
the
is
end of
the
it, the
time.
debate then? Because if
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, well,
Go
then there's
ahead.
one other thing I wanted to read because this, just going back to the antidepressants thing from Addiction Center.
Mm.
Doctors generally do not consider antidepressants to be addictive in the traditional sense, but antidepressants can absolutely cause physical dependence, as evidenced by the withdrawal symptoms stopping or reducing antidepressants can cause. People who suddenly stop taking antidepressants often have withdrawal symptoms. However, very few people give up their daily responsibilities to find antidepressants because the reward is not big enough. There is no euphoric rush of dopamine from taking antidepressants. There are no cravings, no hazardous behaviors, and no examples of prolonged addictive behavior for antidepressants. So you can have a dependency on something, absolutely. In this case, you have a dependency on something that's benefiting your overall health, so I don't think there's even a problem with having dependency, but it's not addictive in the traditional sense that, yeah, you don't get that big rush of
Well,
dopamine. It's not like doing
you read
drugs.
that article that we're not even sure the antidepressants are working the way doctors have said that they've been working for decades, which is just proof that we shouldn't
No,
blindly
you're. So
trust.
why do you misinterpret like every single thing? So no, that study, all that they found was that serotonin is not the sole driver of depression or antidepressants. Is that serotonin is not the only thing necessary. There's a complex thing that happens in the human brain. There's issues with the hippocampus, for example, that can oftentimes contribute to depression. All that study found is that serotonin deficiency is not actually the sole thing responsible for having depression. That's all that found.
Right, but if that's right, but if the pills rely on the basis that serotonin is the main thing causing depression, then wouldn't those pills not work the way that modern medicine has been saying those pills work for the past few
Well, the
decades?
thing is that people aren't actually entirely sure how antidepressants even work. So it does help with serotonin, but it can also help with dopamine and and I think it can also change certain brain pathways as well. So it's not just like you take this, serotonin goes up, no more depression, whoop-de-doo. It's that there's a lot more complexity that takes place. I have a really interesting Harvard article that goes over all the different things that happens in a person's brain when they have depression. And there's a whole ton of issues there. It's not just like serotonin. And in fact, doctors and psychologists have actually known this for quite a while, that it's not just serotonin. It's not that simple. All that study found is that serotonin deficiency is not the sole thing responsible for depression. That's it.
So Hunter, you have a question by MacBox. I'll get back to Toasty Turtle. I want to avoid that question for now, so if you could take that down. But MacBox has a question. How does one know they are trans? So
At what
MacBox wants to
age?
know
As an adult?
how does one know that they are trans? So let's start at like 5 years old.
Yeah, it would probably be like a discomfort with your body. It would probably be a discomfort with the fact that you're being referred to as maybe a he, him, when you internally feel much more like you should be a she, her. Again, it would probably be associated with clinically significant distress and discomfort from these facts as well. Especially if you're a child and if you're talking about like a kid getting treatment or something, then it would
So
obviously have to be diagnosable.
what if you're a boy in a pretty rural town that's pretty like has that like toxic masculinity, conservative manhood vibe about it, very king of the hill vibe about it. And you were an effeminate boy. Don't you think you would feel a lot of that dysphoria that you just explained, like the feeling of, oh boy, I wish I were a girl so that I could like play with Barbies and I can like play dress up and I could do my makeup and I could do my nails and I could do my hair.
Maybe, but again, I've already answered this like 5 times. Yeah, if that's the case, then it's up to the medical institution to properly diagnose somebody.
How is the medical diagnosis? How is the medical institution supposed to be able to distinguish the two?
They would talk with them and track them over months and months at a time, and they would also measure if there was clinically significant distress. They would also be able to go through the diagnosis to see if they actually match the certain qualifiers for actually having gender dysphoria, or if this is just somebody who would like to behave in a more effeminate manner being bullied by their house. This is, again,
Is
why
there
you
like
would
a
go through this. People in your
machine?
chat are making fun of me for saying track them. Yes, you would literally see them regularly and evaluate their behavior and how they're feeling about this. That's how you quote
Someone
unquote
wants
track
to
somebody in the
know.
medical field.
Someone wants to know if they think that or if you think that I have a psychological disorder.
Excuse me?
Someone wants to know if I have a psychological disorder.
I don't know.
Okay. Lauren, what is your opinion on non-binary people? Well, I actually wanted to, yeah, okay. So hold on, anti-vax, anti-vax. Okay, I don't want to hide that comment because the YouTube gods are gonna smite me. Like I can't. We have a Rumble channel, and we want to talk to people who are QAnon and who are all sorts of interesting, but you need at least 25 people to follow you on Rumble. And right now, 23 people are following us on Rumble, and I'm 3 of those accounts. So please give us a follow on Rumble. Lauren De Laguna, same as this. But yeah, we can't really discuss that, but I do want to have, anti.
Was it anti-vax stuff, or was it you can't discuss non-binary stuff?
I don't want to, yeah, it's that stuff, and I just don't want to keep saying that on YouTube because I, of course, am not YouTube overlords, but comment section.
Well, can I answer the non-binary question then?
Yeah, please do. So, like, what is your opinion on, like, the non-binary, and then also, like, all of the neo-pronouns, so, like, frog, self, and then all of the people who consider themselves cats and all of the, you know what I mean?
Right. So a lot of people disagree actually with my take on gender, which is funny enough that I know to you in your chat I probably seem like the biggest soy boy cuck, but there are plenty of lib cucks on Twitter who think that I am like a reactionary Hitler reincarnate because of my position on gender. So I am of the opinion that gender refers to something. It must refer to something, or else the word is meaningless, which I know sounds like very obvious, but it's very challenging when you're talking to people with the neo-pronoun crap. So gender refers to the socially constructed spectrum of masculinity and femininity. So if your gender...
So, like, what is a woman? So, like, you would answer, what is a woman with that?
If somebody said, what is a woman? I would say a woman is someone whose internal self-perception aligns with what we culturally view as being feminine. Just like a man is someone whose internal identity of themselves aligns with what we culturally view as being masculine. But it's a spectrum as well.
So what does that change daily? Yeah, so could that change daily? So
the gender fluid stuff, I don't really know as much about the gender fluid thing, but I can tell you generally my position with gender is that it refers to a socially constructed spectrum of masculinity and femininity. Obviously, it's not just like one here, one here. There's a spectrum, right? You can fall in different areas of that. And so
I got that BDE now, and I'm a dude now.
So if you have somebody who's saying they identify as a frog, there is nothing masculine or feminine in relation to a frog. That has nothing to do with gender. It literally cannot be a gender. And the question I always ask that nobody can ever give me a good answer to because they're all inconsistent and wrong is the question of how then do you differentiate someone's internal identity of religion compared to their internal identity of gender? What makes somebody a Christian who's a woman and not Christian gender? It's because gender refers to your internal identity in relation to masculinity and femininity and that
So what
spectrum.
about non-binary? So you could feel like, can you feel as if you're, so you feel like it's a spectrum, like feminine? Because I do believe femininity, masculinity could be a spectrum. So if you're basing the definition of woman and man off of the definitions of masculine and feminine, then I suppose it could be a spectrum. So then would you say non-binary exists? And could you also be dual binary?
I've never heard dual binary, but when I hear non-binary, usually their identity is still in relation to masculinity or femininity. In this case, it's an identity in relation to a rejection of masculinity and femininity as far as that spectrum goes. A lot of the times, though, I think non-binary people tend to view gender as literally a binary of you're a man, you're a woman, and not a spectrum that you can kind of fall in on different levels. So usually they just mean they reject that binary. But even then,
No,
their
but there's
identity is still
definitely
in relation
people.
to in that case, a rejection of masculinity and femininity.
So there's a surgery now available where you can get like essentially Ken dolls, where you'll have like nothing there, or you'll have like neither
No breasts.
parts. Yeah, you don't have any of the lower stuff, so you don't have like penis or vagina.
Okay.
And so, and there's also surgery where you could have both, where like let's say you were born a woman, they could attach a member. So there's surgeries to
So
make
could
you
you
neither,
actually
and
wait
there's
with that
surgeries to make you
surgery? Could you
both.
like actually fuck yourself? If you got
So
like
if I
a
were
if you
like,
got like a penis
Hunter,
put
go
on,
yourself, you would actually do it.
yeah, like could you like attach a really? Could I get like a vagina on the side of my leg? I mean, that might. Okay, I don't know. I've never heard of that at all. I don't know what. Well, I've
Yeah.
never.
No, that's the thing. So like I'm wondering like, and if that's approved by the medical community, like so do you believe that you could be both gender?
Well, in that case, you would be talking about sex. So biology, I would always classify as sex. Gender refers to just the socially constructed views of gender.
So
So those are
but
correlated with sex, but they're not
has
caused.
the person who chooses to reconstruct themselves to have a sex of, sorry, my dog wants to be let in and out
It's okay.
because he's annoying. Who wants to have both parts? Then what is their gender? Can you be both gendered? Is that a thing?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I've never heard anybody claim to identify that way. I don't know even how that would work. But again, this is kind of where like the gender question comes into. Like people will say there's only two genders, right? And I agree, actually. I think that right now there are socially recognized two genders, but I don't think there needs to be two genders. I think, for example, if there was a large group of people that identified sort of like non-binary, where their identification is still in relation to that spectrum of masculinity or femininity, and they had some kind of a third gender, it's possible, but that doesn't exist right now. So as far as like, are there two genders? I have no idea. I don't, or as far as, sorry, can people identify as like two different genders? I have no idea. I've never heard anybody do that. And I don't even know how that would be possible.
Okay, so Big Man Reef seems to have the only questions left, and these are dumb questions, and it's the chat's fault that we're asking dumb
Big
questions.
Man Reef is a
So
follower of mine. It's okay. You can just ignore him. I see him
feel
saying, why
like
am I against
you.
gingers?
Okay, do you think I look like the type of woman who would commit domestic abuse against you if we were dating? Do you think I would rough you up a
I
bit?
mean, in all fairness, this conversation was already domestic abuse against my brain cells. So I don't know if it would go like physical, but I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. And then yeah, the other one is what is your deal against gingers?
Well, I don't have anything against gingers, just Big Man Reef specifically. He's the ginger that I hate. Everyone else is fine though.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, it's not like it doesn't look like we're getting any solid questions in my chat.
Well, let me see if my chat wanted to ask you anything. Chat, does anybody want to ask Lauren a question before we end this call? Let's see.
Lauren would read my last question. I would, Macbox, but I don't. Another question to Hunter. If someone views themselves as androgynous, what would they fall under, trans or non-binary?
So technically non-binary would still be trans, because trans is just an identity that differs from the gender role that's usually correlated with your biology. So they would technically like tangentially be trans, but no, they would be far more under the label of non-binary.
Have you dated a trans person?
No.
Would you be open to dating a trans person?
Well, I'm married, so I'm required to say
Oh,
no.
are you married to a man or a woman?
A woman and a female.
A woman and a female. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know what her pronouns. Her. She goes by she, her, not frog. Frog self.
Yeah, that's just she, her.
Yeah. Oh, someone's confused. So they want to know, just to clarify, you're not trans, correct?
Yeah, no, I'm not trans. A lot of people like to
All right.
assume that I'm either trans or gay, as if that's an insult when it's really not.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. All of these questions are so dumb.
Somebody
So, Dr.
says,
Campbell.
please, Hunter, in my chat, they say, please, Hunter, can you tell her that you don't immediately get diagnosed just because you match 6 of the criteria? You just have to have at least 6 to be diagnosed.
Okay, but then afterwards, you only need 6 months, apparently. And then I've also heard stories of children getting diagnosed within 6 months, like having feelings, being diagnosed, and getting some sort of medical treatment within 6 months that was permanent. And there's also children now who are suing. Oh, thank you, Sheepy God OG. There's now children who, now that they're adults, who are suing both hospitals and their parents for allowing the surgery to undergo, or
There was
any
one in the
medical.
UK. I thought that it got overturned, though, but maybe I'm thinking of a different lawsuit.
No, there's definitely one in the US as well.
Okay.
Henry, please search for that to prove me right.
No,
We'll
I
see.
believe you. I've heard of
Maybe.
those. I'm not really surprised. Yeah.
What are your views of the mortality of sexuality? I don't know. Lauren, do you have anything against redheaded people? Just you. Since butch lesbians have an internal identity that aligns, and I'm reading chats right now. This is not my opinion. If I say anything offensive, it's because I'm reading the chats and I'm Ron Burgundy. I just read what's in front of me.
Okay, I see this
Since
question.
butch lesbians have internal identity that aligns with what we culturally view as masculine, does Hunter consider them men?
And no, they don't have an internal perception that aligns with what we culturally view as masculine. They have an external presentation that aligns with what we culturally view as being feminine, but they would still have an internal perception that aligns differently because of the fact that they identify as a woman. So no, it would not.
Really like. Sorry, I really like this question.
Okay, go ahead.
Should women have places totally exclusive of men?
Should women have places totally exclusive for men?
Yeah.
I think so. I'm not completely opposed to that or anything. I guess it would really just it would matter as to like what space.
So, like, for instance, like women's sports, like that swimmer in Penn, do you think that swimmer should be allowed to continue to dominate?
Yeah, when it comes to the trans sports issue, this is another one where people tend to think that I'm too conservative on. I'm not generally in favor of the trans sports thing. I think that people need to be realistic, and if they have had gender dysphoria, or let's say they went through a male puberty and then they get on hormones and whatnot, again, more power to them. I don't think that they are not valid in their identity. I would be respectful to them in regards to the fact that they're transgender, of course. But if you've gone through a male puberty, you are going to have some biological advantages compared to cis women. That is just the fact of the matter. And right now, all available research we have heavily suggests that if you do go through a male puberty, that even if you've been on hormones for a little while, you still retain some advantages and some strength. So yes, in that case, I would not be in favor of trans women competing against cis women. Sometimes it gets a little messy. I think that it can get down to individual sports. So I think are some sports that it might be more acceptable, whereas other sports I don't know. So the swimming thing, I'm not too sure. I would have to re-examine what I've said about that prior and the information. But last time I talked about it, I wasn't entirely opposed to that because the biological advantages didn't actually play much of an advantage when it came to swimming specifically. But for other sports like rugby or something that requires a lot more physicality, yeah, it absolutely could play a role there or give an advantage. So I usually just like to look at it on a sports by sports basis. But generally speaking, no, I don't think that like because someone on Twitter had like an extremely ridiculous position, which is that basically if somebody just identifies, they haven't even gone through any medical transition, just identifies differently, that they should then be able to compete against cis women, which is fucking ludicrous.
It would be funny, especially in boxing. Okay, should trans women be put into women's prisons? And then also, before you answer that, I want to read out the super chat because he did a super chat, and I'm not sure you're going to like it, but I'm going to read it anyway. The online master debating community is a bunch of rainbows. A bunch of grifters. It's one of the worst things to arise from the internet. Thank you for $5 and thank you for becoming a member. And now on to the question. Should trans people be put into women's prisons?
I think again that's going to. I know it sounds like a cop out answer to be like it depends on a case by case basis. There are some times in certain instances where I think that is appropriate, primarily because trans women in a male prison is more likely to be abused rather than be a perpetrator of abuse. So in a case like that, I would be okay with that. Again, though, if this is somebody who insincerely changes their identity to try and avoid going to a male prison for something, then yeah, absolutely not. Fuck that person. I'm more
But what
okay
if
with it
all
if
the women who are getting abused when their like cellmate is a trans person, and you know what I mean?
which
Like there's been several cases of pregnancies arising from prisons, and there's been actually a couple reports of women saying that they were sexually abused by people who were transgender and in the prison, whether or not they were actually transgender or
right.
abusing the system.
Well, I think that
Who's to say?
first of all, a sad fact of prison is that sexual abuse takes place regardless. Like men abuse other men, women abuse other women. I think that if you abuse somebody sexually, physically, whatever, that you should probably go to some form of solitary confinement or something. I don't care if you're fucking trans or not. Like you don't fucking abuse people, so fuck them for that, I would say. When you're talking about the pregnancy thing, there was a story of a pregnancy, but that wasn't rape. That was a consensual thing between those two individuals. I'm not saying it's right, but again, I think that it's important to distinguish between like if a trans person fucking raped somebody or if they had consensual sex. But again, I think that if you commit any kind of sex offense in prison, that you should face serious repercussions and probably have your sentence extended, be taken away from other inmates, etc. And then also for the member, really quick, could I just they say that like all of us debate people are massive grifters. If they are interested in talking to me about how I'm a grifter, I would be more than happy to. I've offered before people to pay them $3,000 over PayPal if anybody can come onto my stream and successfully demonstrate that I'm a grifter. And so far,
Oh my god!
And so far, absolutely
I'll come
nobody.
On. When can I come on?
Nobody can do it. Nobody can do it because they either don't know the definition of grifter, or if they do, because honestly, well, if they did know the definition, they wouldn't call me a grifter because it just doesn't make sense.
No, yeah, you're not I think you genuinely believe in what you're preaching. I think that you're not doing it for the clicks. If you're doing it for the clicks, if he was okay, like let's be real. If he was doing it for the clicks, do you really think he would waste 2 to 3 hours on not waste. I very much appreciate it here, but like I have a smaller audience. You have a 400 times my audience size.
And I killed my channel. I was a right-wing channel with almost 700,000 subscribers. Right. And then I said, I'm being a liberal now. And I've lost over 100,000 subscribers. So a grifter, so somebody being insincere for the sake of gain, whether that's money or popularity, there's just no way I would be, by definition, a grifter. It's like impossible. So, yeah.
Someone wants to know if your mom gave you permission to be on the internet today.
No, she didn't, which is why I'm going to have to wrap this up soon. I don't want to get in trouble.
Bad boy. All right. Okay, well, then let's wrap it up. Let's leave it on that note. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Hunter, thank you so much for being here. You're awesome. I really appreciate it. Hunter fans, thank you for taking the time to listen. Hopefully you check out my other interviews. I interview flat earthers and all sorts of interesting people and First Amendment auditors and all sorts, and a Holocaust survivor, all sorts of people. So check it out and have a really good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye. Okay. Ay. Somebody said, why am I being nice to her? Usually I'm calling her dishonest. I yelled at her and called her dishonest multiple times. But like, if she's asking me questions, then I'm not going to just be like a dick for no reason. That's usually not a good look.